This session is titled Beyond the Bullet Points, Firearm Safety Counseling for Military Pediatric Providers. As pediatric providers, we are uniquely positioned to prevent firearm injury through longitudinal relationships, anticipatory guidance, and trust built over time. Today we'll begin by discussing the scope of the issue in the United States and move on to the role of safe storage and safety counseling. Beyond the Bullet Points is intended for pediatric providers with specific attention to those practicing in the military, though the majority of the information is highly relevant to all, regardless of specialty or patient population. Before we begin, please use the QR code or web address to access a brief survey. Your responses are valuable for improving this curriculum and essential for this research project. The survey takes about 5 minutes to complete and is anonymous. Firearm injury is now the leading cause of death for children and adolescents in the United States. 12 children die every day from firearms. This number does not spike after mass shootings. It does not wait for war or disaster. It happens every day, one family at a time, quietly, predictably, and largely outside of the hospital. Every 2 days, the equivalent of one classroom doesn't come home. If 12 children died every day from a new virus, a toy defect, or a contaminated food product, there would be an emergency response. This is already happening, and it's going in the wrong direction. Here you see the top 5 causes of mortality in this age group across 22 years. COVID and social unrest saw a large boom in gun sales starting in 2020, at which point firearm injuries increased dramatically, overtaking motor vehicle accidents as the top killer of American children. Firearms and children coexist in 2 out of every 5 U.S. households, which accounts to approximately 30 million children. This is not about rare exposure. This is a pediatric population the size of Texas. 15% of those homes have at least one firearm that is kept unlocked and loaded, placing 4.6 million children at highest risk. The majority of firearms involved in fatal shootings, both intentional and unintentional, originate from the home, most often belonging to a parent in common reachable areas. In about half of unintentional cases, the injury is inflicted by someone else, usually another child, and 2/3 of cases occur while playing with the firearm. These are not acts of aggression, they're acts of curiosity. The remainder include handling, demonstration, or recreational use, often assuming safety controls were engaged. These are accessible firearms. 75% are stored, unlocked, and loaded, often for protection. Despite national guidelines recommending that health professionals counsel families on firearm safety, such conversations rarely occur in clinical settings. Even where providers routinely ask about lifestyle choices that affect health and safety, like nutrition, use of car seats, and secondhand smoke, firearms in the home are rarely asked about or discussed. In the military family, firearm ownership is even more prevalent. Children of service members are not insulated from civilian injury patterns. Just like nutrition, car seats, and secondhand smoke, it's important to frame firearm safety as harm reduction and health promotion. And military medicine is uniquely positioned to identify and reduce risk through universal screening and targeted counseling efforts. Additionally, military families face unique stressors and trauma exposures, including deployments, relocation, mental health issues, coupled with cultural sensitivities regarding ownership that can limit open dialogue. Together, this contributes to higher rates of firearm injuries, including suicide and intimate partner violence. Increased firearms training among service members does not always translate to increased safety. Rather, normalization can lead to increased curiosity. Military families are not less responsible, they're more exposed. A child does not inherit training, only access. Ultimately, this is not about ownership, but about anticipatory guidance. These firearm injuries and deaths are preventable. Both safe firearm practices, including secure firearm storage practices, and health professional counseling are studied protective factors against both unintentional and intentional firearm injuries among children. Despite provider concerns about alienating patients, a majority of the public, and gun owners specifically, are receptive to discussing firearms in healthcare settings, and half would consider locking unsecured firearms to prevent access by children. Please scan the QR code and open the sorting activity. You'll see a list of recommendations. As we move on to discuss these prevention strategies, listen for each recommendation and categorize into the appropriate column, either evidence-based or not recommended. Before we discuss counseling strategies, let's go over the available safe storage options. All guns should be stored unloaded, locked, and separated from ammo. Evidence consistently demonstrates that unsafe storage practices raise mortality risk, while counseling, safety device provision, and use mitigate risk. When risk is elevated, the safest option is often temporary storage outside the home. Options include transfer to someone they trust, although not everyone is legally allowed to possess a firearm, and state laws vary regarding person-to-person transfers. Gun dealers are another option. As a trusted part of many firearm owners' communities, some shops offer storage or even pickup services, though not all, and some require a background check. Cost can vary. Shooting ranges sometimes offer private lockers or storage. Again, availability and cost vary, and some may require background checks. Commercial storage facilities may allow firearm storage and typically don't require background checks. The renter decides who holds the key. Costs can be higher though, and not all facilities permit firearms. In situations where other options aren't available, pawn shops may offer short-term storage, but there's the risk the firearm will be sold and background checks may still be required. Many local police or sheriff's departments may either store firearms themselves or know about community options. It's essential to call first. In some cases, you may not be able to get the firearms back, and they will run a background check. And finally, many military installations have free storage at the armory for service members. If firearms remain in the home, there are critical storage options that can reduce risk. These options are most effective when combined and when ammo is stored separately. Locking devices, such as cable locks, which run a cable through the barrel or action to prevent accidental firing, and trigger locks, which prevent the trigger from being engaged, are often low cost or free, many times supplied alongside sale of the firearm or obtainable from the local police department. They're easy to use, though may be dismantled if cheaply made. While cable locks require the removal of ammunition to use, it's essential to store the key separately or with someone trustworthy. Gun cases and lockboxes allow safe transport of a firearm. They're relatively affordable, quick to use, though too small for certain firearms. Again, if not electronic, it's essential to store the key separately. Gun safes tend to be much larger and more expensive, designed to fit into the home and prevent robbery of the safe or its contents. Other safety measures, such as a locking device or disassembly of the firearm, can be used in tandem. The more barriers, the safer the strategy. Firearms should never be left unattended and unsecured in vehicles. This includes glove boxes, which are a primary source of stolen guns. If transport is necessary, console and cargo area storage options exist, typically more expensive than a lockbox because they're built in, but more difficult to steal. Secure storage accessories include electronic monitors that alert owners if anyone accesses the storage device, and electronic holsters which allow fast access if authorized. Finally, there are new and evolving technologies that alert owners of access or prevent access and use unless certain biometrics are met, such as fingerprint or iris scan, magnets or radio frequency identification technology, and intrinsic combination locks. Firearm injury prevention counseling works, but only when families stay engaged in the conversation and are ready to listen. Direct information delivery, especially when we lead with urgency, pressure, or judgment, can backfire. The approach presented here is designed to respect patient autonomy and expertise with the goal of behavior change. It begins with assessment of existing knowledge, current practices, risk factors, and readiness to engage. Step 2 is to advise, share information, and make tailored recommendations. Step 3 is to ask, check understanding, reflect change talk, and ask importance ruler questions. Finally, the act step is to provide resources and continue to revisit, escalating when necessary. The first step is assessing risk factors. Do parents own firearms? What current storage practices do they use? What information do they have? It's important to universally screen patients in the same way you would for other harm reduction, and to ask in a respectful, non-confrontational, yet firm manner. Ask who is in the home, and do children have access to firearms at home or elsewhere? Ask adolescents about ideation. Influencing behavior change is difficult and complex. Simply giving facts is not enough, and often increases resistance in ambivalent patients. Acknowledging that families often know more about firearms than clinicians do can help build trust and collaboration. Motivational interviewing doesn't mean avoiding safety conversations, but delivering them in a way that reduces opposition and keeps families collaborating over multiple visits. Remember that in the stages of change from Prochaska and DiClemente's trans-theoretical model, people naturally move dynamically in and out of stages, so this tends not to just be a one-time conversation. The goal is incremental change and therapeutic alliance that allows for continued engagement. A single encounter may not result in immediate secure storage, but moving the needle may mean increasing a family's willingness to discuss the topic again in the future. So what risk factors are you looking for specifically? Primarily access to firearms. The mere presence in the home or any home that the child visits significantly increases risk of harm to the child and others in the home. This is regardless of reason for ownership, often reported to protect those in the home. Unsafe or unsecure storage. For example, loaded or with the magazine easily accessible, hidden, for example, on the top shelf of a closet or refrigerator, bedstand drawer, car glove compartment. Adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, including abuse, interpersonal or domestic violence, crime, mental illness, substance use, and any previous firearm injury. This means that trauma patients in hospital or in office follow-up are at high risk and may benefit from this approach to prevent future injuries and death. Recent stressors increase risk. These might include job loss, divorce, medical emergency, deployment or permanent change in duty location, among countless others. And finally, specific locations with weak firearm legislation, such as permissive carrying or permitless carry policies, lack of universal background checks, minimal regulation on assault weapons, weak dealer accountability, or lack of red flag laws to temporarily remove firearms from individuals posing a danger to themselves or others. Firearm injury happens when multiple safeguards fail. Preventable layers in the Swiss cheese model include safe storage, supervision, mental health screening, community resources, and professional guidance. A multi-pronged approach allows for screening and counseling to act as additional barriers in multiple settings. The second step is to advise. The approach you take matters. Be informed on the basics of firearms and why people own them. Know the different safety options and resources available. It's likely that patients will already know much more about guns and gun safety. Showcasing your knowledge choice to inform yourself will aid a productive, collaborative engagement built on trust. Be respectful. Ownership can be closely connected to identity or feelings of safety. Acknowledge this and the role firearms play in their lives. When possible, ask permission to offer information or use autonomy-supportive language like "you may already know this." This helps preserve caregiver autonomy, but also helps reduce the instinct to argue for the status quo. The exception is acute risk. Do not ask permission when it would imply the right to decline necessary safety interventions. Ultimately, it is about respecting their right to own with cultural humility, recognition of implicit biases, and working together toward a harm reduction focus. This means using neutral and non-stigmatizing language, focusing on health and safety. If opinions or politics come up, redirect the conversation back towards a shared goal of risk reduction for the patient. For at-risk patients, avoid using threatening or antagonistic language like surrender, seize, confiscate. Instead, say temporary hold for safekeeping or voluntarily keep safe. Not every family needs to take steps or have a conversation. Talk about access when it's clinically relevant, but remember that all children may go to a house with access to a firearm, and even small steps are beneficial. Find a solution that works for the family in front of you. No one-size solution fits all. It should be tailored to each individual patient and family based on type of risk present and what works for them. If a parent owns a gun for protection, it may not be acceptable to keep it unloaded and locked up. In this case, maybe the solution is a quick access lockbox or a biometric holster, and long-term relationships allow you to revisit readiness for change over time. Here are some common misconceptions that may come up while advising. Child play with toy guns increases risk. This has not been shown to be true. However, video game parental controls do help reduce risk of violence. Young children do not have the physical strength to pull a trigger. Children as young as 3 are able to pull the trigger of a handgun, and believing that they aren't able is only true until this changes. Child-focused firearm education reliably reduces risk. This has not been shown to be true consistently, and while programs that teach children not to touch and tell an adult are helpful, they do not reliably work and must be combined with other methods. This is similar to the next one. Hiding a firearm out of sight is as effective as securing it safely. Children reliably find hidden firearms and proceed to handle them when encountered. Quick access prevents violence. Although adult training and safety classes do increase safe behaviors, studies show that more firearms accessible even to trained and well-intentioned adults leads to increased, not decreased injuries. Teen classes and licensing, such as for hunting, help with safety knowledge, though increased access, such as a gun range membership, is ineffective at reducing risk. While not an exhaustive list, the last misconception is that legislative efforts prohibit firearm conversations from taking place. Although this has been attempted, there are no state or federal policies that prohibit clinicians from asking patients clinically relevant questions about firearms. We've discussed evidence, safe storage options, risk factors, and counseling strategies. Using the first 2 steps of the 4 A's framework, assess and advise, consider this case. You are seeing a 10-year-old for a routine well-child visit. She lives with her parents, both of whom are active duty military, and her 2 brothers, ages 6 and 17. Firearm safety has not been discussed previously, and no concerns are raised. First, take a minute of individual reflection to consider an opening sentence or 2 you would use to introduce firearm safety in this visit. Next, turn to someone next to you or your table and discuss what you came up with. Work to refine it together so that it is respectful, preserves autonomy, reduces defensiveness, focuses on harm reduction, and acknowledges known risk factors and identity without assumptions. Finally, we'll share a few with the entire group. Responses should demonstrate the following opening characteristics. Compassionate acknowledgement of injury without assigning blame. Normalizes conversation, framed as standard of care. Collaborative over corrective tone. Respect for autonomy while addressing elevated risk. Focuses on safety, not ownership, politics, or policy. Some examples include, many families in our community own firearms. Can we talk about what storage looks like at home? I like to go over a few routine safety topics with all families, things like car seats, helmets, and firearms. Would it be okay if we talked about that for a minute? I ask all families about safety at home, including firearms. Can you tell me how they're stored where your child lives? Or what's your approach to storage? Would it be helpful to look at a few options? Would it be okay if I shared what we know about safest options? Kids often spend time at friends' houses. Have you considered asking about firearm storage when your child goes somewhere new? The third step is to ask. You're checking for understanding, but more importantly, you're listening, especially for signals that the family may be open to change. Recognizing and reflecting change talk here is critical. These are statements that indicate consideration of new behaviors, no matter how subtle. Reflecting this talk back at the family validates their perspective and strengthens their own motivation for safety. Sustained talk, on the other hand, reflects a desire to maintain the status quo. Reflecting sustained talk too much can actually strengthen resistance, while arguing or persuading tends to shut the conversation down. If a parent says, "My child doesn't know where the gun is hidden and isn't strong enough to pull the trigger anyways," don't say, "You don't think it's necessary to make a change." You also don't want to invalidate with a statement like, "Kids always find guns, you can't rely on hiding it." Or accuse, "Why would you keep a loaded gun around kids? They can't pull the trigger until they can." Look out for statements like, "Look, I know you have to ask these questions, but we're fine. My handgun keeps us safe. I could always lock it up if I really feel like I need to." This opens the door to reflecting change talk. For example, you can then say, "You have ideas about when it makes sense to lock up your guns if you need to." If you say instead, "You need your handgun to feel safe," that would be reflecting sustained talk. Avoid a directive approach as well, which can cause polarization and subsequently less cooperation and willingness to change. For example, "Look, I'm concerned about the way you store guns. You need to make a change to protect your family." You're likely familiar with confidence scales used in motivational interviewing. Aunan et al. In 2025 argue for the use of importance scales in this context. Firearm owners may be very confident in their ability to use a gun safely, but might not view doing so as necessary. Asking why a parent chose a 5 instead of a 2 forces them to articulate their own reasons for valuing safety, which elicits change talk. Asking what is needed to move from a 5 to a 6 helps identify small, achievable steps, not all or nothing solutions. Finally, when action is needed, it should match the level of risk. For low risk, education and storage counseling may be sufficient. Studies show that actually providing safety devices in addition to counseling on their use is even more effective in driving safer behavior. For higher risk, escalate recommendations or intervention for an imminent safety concern. This might mean clinical action, court-ordered or voluntary temporary removal of firearms. Now that we've gone over the need for firearm safety counseling and the 4A's approach, let's discuss some key takeaways. Firearm injury is the leading cause of death for U.S. children. 12 die every day, mostly from accessible guns taken from the home. Parents frequently underestimate children's access, but most are open to safer storage. Military families have unique stressors and risk factors. Safe storage and counseling are effective strategies to reduce firearm injuries. To reach patients, it is critical to frame the conversation on harm reduction over politics. Although state-level efforts attempt to prohibit such conversations from taking place, no policies prohibit clinicians from asking patients clinically relevant questions about firearms. Approach matters. Use the 4A's framework. Assess risk universally and respectfully. Use motivational interviewing to keep families engaged, preserve relationships, and move the needle over time. Advise with firearm literacy, respect, and cultural humility. Focus on harm reduction over politics and provide tailored solutions. Check understanding, listen, and reflect change talk. Use importance ruler questions. Finally, act proportionate to risk. Education, resources, and revisiting the topic for most. Escalate when needed. Before going over some resources, please use this QR code or web address to access the brief post survey. Your responses are valuable for improving this curriculum and essential for the research project. It takes about 5 minutes to complete and is anonymous. Countless resources exist to combat this epidemic. This is a tailored list available to you on your handouts. I'll briefly talk about a few. For families, the Be Smart campaign stands for Secure All Guns in Homes and Vehicles, Model Responsible Behavior, Ask About Unsecured Guns in Other Homes, Recognize the Role of Guns in Suicide, and Tell Your Peers to be smart in the storage and use of firearms. Brady United is the nation's oldest gun violence prevention group. Together with the AAP, the Brady Center to Prevent Gun Violence developed the Ask campaign to teach families to ask the question, is there an unlocked gun in your house or vehicle? The Bullet Points Project is funded by the state of California and developed by the California Firearm Violence Research Center at UC Davis. Project Child Safe is a program of the National Shooting Sports Foundation, or NSSF. Every Town for Gun Safety is the largest gun violence prevention organization in the country, and its website provides up-to-date tracking of incidents across the U.S. There are legal and court-ordered means to protect family members from harm, as well as hospital and community programs that provide aid, training, free safety devices, and disposal or storage options. For the military, there are many options on base and online, including OneSource, Family Readiness Center or Installation Safety Offices, the Armory, and asking your chain of command or medical officers. For providers, national organizations like the AAP have gun safety campaigns and toolkits available on their websites. Examples of available tools and curricula include Safer, Storing Firearms Prevents Harm video series, Calm for pediatric providers, counseling on access to lethal means to prevent youth suicide course, and Promoting Firearm Injury Prevention and Patient Safety in the Emergency Department. Providers are mandatory reporters in the case of child abuse, domestic violence, or threats of serious harm. In all cases, though, there are other options for referrals to additional social and medical services.